Minister Enoch Godongwana's budget speech is being criticized for not being bold enough to tackle key economic challenges. The Alternative Information and Development Centre rejects the budget, saying the government makes choices in favour of the elites, creditors, corporate investors and credit rating agencies. Let's unpack this now with Dominic Brown, the head of Economic Justice Programme at the Alternative Information and Development Centre. Very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. You've expressed your views about the budget speech, saying that it centres around the interests of the wealthy over the needs of the majority. What do you mean by this?
So if you look at the spending line, what happens in terms of the spending cuts, we see dramatic cuts in relation to healthcare in nominal terms of more than 200 million rand over the next year, and that's a more than 5% real reduction. And this is reflected in many other key spending areas. And then on the other hand, we see tax relief to affluent individuals. And this is just one of the examples that shows where the priorities of the budget lies.
We know that Trade Union Federation COSATU, for instance, has revealed that it's planning a 7-day strike, or they're unhappy with how government has handled the public service impact, especially when it comes to collective bargaining. What are your thoughts around this aspect of the budget and how it was communicated?
So, as we know, this has been a protracted battle. In 2020, government reneged on the final year of the 3-year public sector wage agreement, and since 2019, the public sector wage bill has been one of the main targets of government's austerity agenda, and we see that continuing with a 7% reduction in real terms to compensation to healthcare workers over the medium term, and a 3.3% reduction to compensation to teachers over the medium term. And as we have shown previously, this is not just about wages. It would also mean that there will be a continuation of unfilled vacancies in key public institutions like health and education, where there are already estimated to be tens of thousands of vacancies. And this will mean a deterioration of working conditions within the public sector, but it will also mean that a decline of service delivery with higher pupil to teacher ratios, as well as longer times waiting in clinics and hospitals for services.
As you and I speak, you're currently in the dock. I know you have your views expressed around the Eskom debt relief. And, there was, I suppose, some size of relief from one perspective around the conditions that come with this debt relief. What are your views around it?
Yeah, so we agree that we have to relieve Eskom of its financial pressures so that it can focus its attention on maintenance of the fleets, and also to look to investing in building new generative capacity. The current conditionalities proposed by Treasury prevents Eskom from building any new generative capacity. It also stipulates that we need to expedite the unbundling process and the setting up of the national transmission or independent grid to allow for the increased private sector generation in electricity. The problem is that this will, in the medium term, lead to rising prices, more rapidly rising tariffs, but it will also mean that our energy supply will be put at greater risk as a result.
You've also spoken about some of the missing the opportunity to utilize the 45 billion rand surplus of the government employees pension fund. How best do you think that could have been used as a platform to make some gains?
Absolutely. So this goes back to the whole fiscal framework and questioning whether or not there's greater pools of resources that we can harness to ensure that we implement greater levels of social protection. And just by way of an example, the old age pension grant will be worth 40 Rand less in real terms this year, and the social relief of distress grant is worth just under 70 Rand less than it was in 2020, so it would only be worth about 280 Rand in the shops today. And we're saying that there's a variety of potential pools of finance, and one of the options would have been for the government employers' pension fund to take on additional or added Eskom debt. It currently has 20% of Eskom's liabilities, and if it, as you said, used the 50 billion Rand on average surpluses it has every year, it could have relieved pressure of the fiscus so that we could have directed extra resources to healthcare, for example, and education, which has been cut.
So in the midst of this, I mean, you say that a social explosion is definitely on the cards. I mean, we're seeing evidence of that with some of the announcements that have been made around the strikes that are being planned. How do you think the budget could have better accommodated the working class as opposed to really centering, in your view, to the elite?
So in the first instance, it would have all amounted to a change in the framework, and we would have to end budget cuts, and that would have meant increased spending to healthcare and education. It would have also meant that we would have had to direct resources to filling the vacancies within these sectors. I think secondly, and very critically, we would have had to see above inflationary increases to social grants and a clear indication of when a decent basic income grant would be implemented on a permanent basis. And then thirdly, I think we should have, for example, indicated how the resources would have gone to finance the diesel, for instance, to run the open gas cycle turbines at Eskom, and also additional resources for the maintenance that would be required to ensure that Eskom's fixed. So it's estimated that it would require about 1 trillion Rand to resolve the load shedding problem in the country. These are just three examples. And then on the revenue side, we should have looked to not provide tax relief for high income earners. We should have instead looked to increase the effective personal income tax rates on high income earners, and look to implement a progressive net wealth tax on the top 1% of the wealthy in the country. And three, we could have taken much stronger measures to combat illicit financial flows. For example, implementing a general anti-tax avoidance act, strengthening capital controls to ensure that there's greater regulation about money leaving the country. And in this way, we may have even prevented being grey-listed.
Very well. Thank you so much. Thanks for weighing in on this discussion.